I'm Ursula, 32, and my life shattered in an airport terminal. I was boarding a flight to Chicago when I decided to check our home security camera one last time. There he was, my husband Eric, with his ex-girlfriend Cassandra, laughing on our couch. My hand trembled as I watched them so comfortable together, his arm casually draped around her shoulders. 5 years of marriage, and in one moment, I became a stranger, looking in on my own life. If you're watching this, I'd love to know where you're from. Drop a like and subscribe if you've ever had that gut feeling something wasn't right in your relationship. Trust me, this story might make you realize why those instincts matter more than we think. My career as a marketing executive for a luxury tech brand had always been demanding. I specialized in digital campaigns for high-end products, which meant I occasionally traveled for important client meetings or industry conferences. It was during one of these work trips 5 years ago that I met Eric. I wasn't even supposed to attend my colleague Jennifer's wedding that weekend, but a last-minute cancellation for a business trip freed up my schedule. Eric was the wedding photographer, tall with thoughtful brown eyes and an infectious laugh that made everyone around him smile. I noticed him immediately, not just because he was handsome in that artistic, slightly disheveled way, but because of how he moved through the space, putting everyone at ease while capturing genuine moments rather than forced poses. "You don't look like you want your picture taken," he said when he approached me at the reception. "Is it that obvious?" I laughed, feeling self-conscious in my navy blue bridesmaid dress. "The camera can tell when someone's uncomfortable," Eric replied, "but I bet we can find a way to make you forget it's even there." He spent the next 20 minutes making me laugh, asking about my job, and sharing stories about the most dramatic wedding disasters he'd witnessed. By the end of the night, I'd given him my number, and he called the very next day. Our romance was a whirlwind. Within 6 months, we were living together in my Seattle apartment. By our 1-year anniversary, Eric had proposed during a sunrise hike at Mount Rainier, capturing the moment with his camera set on a timer. The diamond ring caught the first rays of morning light as he slid it onto my finger, and I felt like the luckiest woman alive. "I've never felt this way about anyone," he told me that morning, his voice thick with emotion. "You're everything I've been looking for." We married in a small ceremony 3 months later. Eric insisted on hiring another photographer, saying he wanted to be fully present on our day rather than working behind a camera. We bought a beautiful craftsman-style home in a quiet Seattle suburb about a year after that, spending weekends painting walls and restoring original woodwork. On the surface, we had created the perfect life together. Eric's photography business allowed him to work primarily from home, editing photos in his office while I commuted to my company's downtown headquarters. He specialized in weddings and engagement photos, capturing love stories for a living. The irony of that isn't lost on me now. It was about 6 months into our relationship when Eric first mentioned Cassandra. We were looking through some of his older portfolio work, and I noticed a stunning redhead appearing in multiple collections. "That's Cassandra," he said casually. "My ex. We dated through college and a couple years after, almost 6 years total." "She's beautiful," I said, studying the woman's heart-shaped face and bright smile. "What happened between you two?" Eric shrugged, flipping to the next series of photos. "We just wanted different things. She was pursuing a law degree and wanted to move to New York. I couldn't imagine leaving Seattle. We tried long distance for a while, but eventually we both agreed it wasn't working." I nodded, accepting his explanation without question. Why wouldn't I? He spoke about her without any obvious emotion, just the matter-of-fact tone of someone describing an amicable but definitive ending. "Do you still talk to her?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Not really," he replied. "She moved back to Seattle about a year ago for a job at a law firm downtown. We ran into each other at a coffee shop, once said hello, caught up briefly. But that's it. Ancient history." I believed him. I had no reason not to. But over the years of our marriage, Cassandra's name would occasionally surface in conversation. a chance encounter at a restaurant, a mutual friend's birthday party. Each time, Eric assured me these run-ins were coincidental and meaningless. "You have nothing to worry about," he would say, kissing my forehead. That relationship has been over for years. There were red flags, of course, moments I can see clearly now, but chose to ignore then. Eric was increasingly protective of his phone, always keeping it face down and taking it with him everywhere, even to the bathroom. There were unexplained absences, photo shoots that ran suspiciously late, meetings with potential clients that couldn't be rescheduled. Once I found a woman's earring in our car. Eric claimed it must have belonged to a bride from a recent wedding. I believed him because I wanted to, because the alternative was too painful to consider. The past year had been particularly difficult for us. We'd been trying to conceive without success, and the strain of negative pregnancy tests month after month was taking a toll on our relationship. Eric had been reluctant to see fertility specialists, despite my concerns, always insisting we just needed more time, more patience. "These things can't be forced," he would say, whenever I brought up making appointments. "The stress of medical intervention might make things worse." Looking back, his resistance makes perfect sense now. 2 weeks before my flight to Chicago, there had been a break-in 3 houses down from ours. Nothing violent, just a daytime burglary while the homeowners were at work, but it left everyone in the neighborhood on edge. Eric suggested we invest in a comprehensive home security system with cameras inside and outside our house. "For peace of mind," he said as he installed the equipment himself. "Especially when one of us is traveling," I agreed enthusiastically, never imagining that this system meant to protect us would ultimately reveal the truth that had been hiding in plain sight all along. The call from my sister came at 5:30 in the morning. My mother had suffered a heart attack and was in intensive care at Northwestern Memorial Hospital in Chicago. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, but Karen's voice trembled as she said, "You should come as soon as possible, Ursula." I booked the first available flight while Eric brought me coffee and helped me pack. He seemed appropriately concerned, asking questions about my mother's condition and assuring me that everything would be fine. But looking back, there was something else there too, an underlying current of nervous energy, a certain eagerness in his movements as he pulled my suitcase from the closet. "I wish I could come with you," he said, his voice carrying just the right note of regret. "But I have that editorial shoot for Seattle Magazine tomorrow. It's been scheduled for months and they've built the entire spread around my availability." "Don't worry about it," I assured him, throwing toiletries into my travel bag. "Mum would understand. She knows how important this client is for your business. I'll come out this weekend if she's still in the hospital," he promised, zipping my suitcase closed. "Just keep me posted on how she's doing." Our goodbye that morning was tense, but I attributed it to the stress of the situation. Eric hugged me a beat too quickly, his kiss landing awkwardly near my ear instead of my lips. "Do you want me to drive you to the airport?" he asked, already reaching for his phone, presumably to check his schedule. "No, I'll just call an Uber," I replied, noticing how he seemed to relax at my answer. "You need to prepare for your shoot tomorrow." As the Uber drove me away from our home, I glanced back to see Eric standing in the doorway. He waved once, then immediately turned and went inside, pulling out his phone before the door even closed behind him. During the ride to the airport, my phone buzzed with a series of texts from Eric. "Let me know when you get to the airport. Text me before you board. Call me when you land in Chicago. I love you. Everything will be okay." This unusual attentiveness struck me as odd. Eric wasn't typically so communicative, but I was too preoccupied with worry about my mother to dwell on it. The airport was chaotic that morning. A weather system moving through the Midwest had caused numerous delays and cancellations, creating long lines at security and crowds of frustrated travelers. My flight was delayed by 45 minutes, then another 30, giving me time to respond to urgent work emails that couldn't wait, despite my family emergency. "We understand you need to be with your family right now," my boss had written. "But if you could just finalize the Henderson campaign proposal before you board the team, can handle the presentation tomorrow." So there I was, sitting at my gate, typing furiously on my laptop, trying to ignore the announcements of further delays crackling over the PA system. When I finally sent the completed proposal, I had about 20 minutes before boarding was scheduled to begin. That's when I remembered the new security system. It had become a habit to check it whenever one of us was away from home, a quick reassurance that everything was as it should be. I pulled out my phone, opened the app, and selected the living room camera feed. I expected to see an empty house, maybe our cat Milo lounging on the sofa in a patch of sunlight. What I saw instead made my blood run cold. Eric was sitting on our couch, but he wasn't alone. Cassandra was beside him, her red hair unmistakable, even on the small screen of my phone. They weren't just talking, they were laughing intimately, sharing a bottle of wine. My wine from the collection I'd been saving for special occasions. As I watched, frozen in disbelief, Eric reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind Cassandra's ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. This wasn't the awkward interaction of former lovers who'd accidentally reconnected. This was the comfortable, familiar behaviour of two people who knew each other deeply, who spent time together regularly, who had clear, established patterns to their interaction. I checked the timestamp on the feed. It was live. Barely an hour had passed since I'd left our home, and already another woman was sitting in my place. The boarding announcement for my flight echoed distantly through the terminal, but I couldn't move. I couldn't tear my eyes away from my phone screen as Eric leaned in toward Cassandra, their foreheads nearly touching as they looked at something on his phone. They were laughing again, sharing some private joke that excluded me entirely. In that moment, staring at the small screen in my hand, I felt like I was watching strangers in a movie, except the setting was my living room. The male lead was my husband, and I was the unseen audience witnessing a story I never knew was being written. The world around me faded to a dull roar as I stared at my phone screen. My stomach lurched violently, and for a moment, I thought I might be sick right there in the airport terminal. My vision narrowed to a tunnel with only the security camera feed in focus. Everything else blurred into meaningless shapes and colours. "Miss, are you okay?" A concerned voice broke through my shock. I looked up to see an older man in a flight attendant's uniform, watching me with concern. "You've gone completely pale." "I'm fine," I managed to say, though my voice sounded distant and strange to my own ears. "Just bad news from home." He nodded sympathetically. "Well, we're boarding now if you're on this flight to Chicago. Priority passengers and those needing assistance can board first." The final boarding announcement forced me to make a decision quickly. I could cancel my trip, turn around and confront Eric and Cassandra in person. I could call him right now and demand an explanation. Or I could proceed as planned, giving myself time to think, to process, to decide how to handle this revelation. Something inside me, perhaps self-preservation, perhaps a desire to fully understand the scope of the betrayal, prompted me to choose the third option. I would go to Chicago as planned. I would pretend I had seen nothing, and I would use this time to figure out exactly what was happening in my marriage. Before boarding, I quickly took several screenshots of the camera feed, capturing Eric and Cassandra together on my couch. I wasn't entirely sure why, as evidence for myself that I wasn't imagining things, proof for a confrontation later, documentation for divorce proceedings. The thought made me dizzy again, but I saved the images anyway before shutting down the app and putting my phone in airplane mode. The 4-hour flight to Chicago was excruciating. I sat by the window staring out at clouds that gradually gave way to the patchwork landscape of the Midwest, unable to focus on anything but the images burned into my memory. The woman seated next to me, a grandmother returning from visiting family in Seattle, seemed to sense my distress. "First time flying?" she asked kindly, offering me a peppermint when the plane hit a patch of turbulence and I gripped the armrests. "No," I replied, accepting the candy, even though I couldn't imagine eating it. "Just A lot on my mind. Family troubles. She guessed, her eyes wise behind tortoiseshell glasses. When I nodded vaguely, she patted my hand. Whatever it is, remember that you're stronger than you think. My mother always used to say that God never gives us more than we can handle. I wasn't religious, but I appreciated her attempt at comfort. I hope your mother was right, I said, attempting a smile that felt more like a grimace. As the plane carried me further from Seattle, my mind replayed moments from my marriage with new, terrible clarity. The weekend 3 months ago, when Eric insisted I go to my college roommate's bachelorette party, despite my hesitation about leaving him alone while he was fighting a cold. The mysterious credit card charge at an upscale restaurant on a night when he claimed to be editing photos at home. The text messages I'd glimpsed on his phone from someone labelled simply C in his contacts. Each memory, innocent at the time, now reconfigured itself into a pattern of deception that made me question everything about the past 5 years. Had any of it been real? Was our entire marriage a convenient facade for Eric while he maintained his relationship with Cassandra? I thought back to our fertility struggles and felt a new wave of nausea. Had Eric been sabotaging our attempts to conceive? Was that why he always discouraged medical intervention, the idea that he might have been deliberately preventing pregnancy while letting me suffer through the emotional roller coaster of trying and failing month after month, made me physically ill? By the time the plane touched down at O'Hare, I felt emotionally numb and physically exhausted. The bright terminal lights seemed too harsh, the announcements too loud, the crowds too close. I collected my suitcase from the baggage claim in a daze and ordered a rideshare to the hotel I'd booked near the hospital. "You doing okay back there?" the driver asked, meeting my eyes in the rearview mirror. "You look like you've had a rough day." "My mother's in the hospital," I said, which was true but felt like only a fraction of the weight I was carrying. "Heart attack." "I'm sorry to hear that," he replied, his voice softening. "Northwestern." When I nodded, he added, "They've got great cardiac care there. My uncle had a triple bypass last year and they took real good care of him." I murmured my thanks for his reassurance, then leaned my head against the window, watching Chicago's skyline come into view. The city where I'd grown up felt both familiar and strange now, like returning to a childhood home to find all the furniture rearranged. My phone buzzed with a text from Eric. "Have you landed? How was the flight?" I stared at his message, this mundane question, from a man who had betrayed me in the most intimate way possible, and felt a surge of something between rage and heartbreak. With trembling fingers, I typed a response that gave nothing away. "Just landed. Flight was fine. Heading to the hotel now. Will go to the hospital after I check in." His reply came almost immediately. "Give your mum my love. Call when you can." The casual normalcy of our exchange made everything so much worse. While I was unraveling, he was continuing the performance of being a concerned, loving husband, a role he had apparently been playing for our entire marriage. I put my phone away without responding and stared out at the city I once called home, wondering how my life had shattered so completely in the span of a single day. The hotel room was sterile and anonymous, beige walls, generic artwork. The faint scent of industrial cleaner barely masked by air freshener. I set my suitcase down and sat heavily on the edge of the bed, pulling out my phone to examine the screenshots I'd taken at the airport. Looking at them again with some distance and clarity, I noticed details I'd missed in my initial shock. The ease with which Cassandra navigated my living room, kicking off her heels and tucking her feet beneath her on my couch. The way she reached for her wine glass on the coffee table without looking, knowing exactly where it was placed. The framed photo of Eric and me from our wedding day that had been turned face down. These weren't the actions of someone visiting for the first time. This was the comfortable behaviour of someone who had been in my home repeatedly. With shaking hands, I opened the security app again and selected the live camera feed. I half expected to see an empty house, Eric having left for the photography shoot he'd claimed to have. Instead, I watched as Eric and Cassandra moved around my kitchen together preparing dinner. She opened cabinets without hesitation, knowing exactly where the plates were kept. He stood behind her at the stove, arms wrapped around her waist, chin resting on her shoulder as she stirred something in a pan. The domesticity of the scene was like a physical blow. This wasn't just a one-time indiscretion or a moment of weakness. This was an established relationship, one that apparently operated seamlessly in my absence. I increased the volume on my phone and their conversation became audible. "Do you think she suspects anything?" Cassandra asked, turning slightly in Eric's arms. Eric shook his head. "Not a chance. Ursula trusts me completely. Besides, she's preoccupied with this baby thing. As long as I keep stringing her along with that, she doesn't question much else." Their casual dismissal of me, of my feelings and hopes, ignited something beyond hurt, a cold, clarifying anger. I watched as they continued cooking, sharing occasional kisses and intimate touches completely at ease in the home Eric and I had built together. After about 20 minutes of observation, each moment more painful than the last, I faced a decision: call Eric immediately and confront him or continue gathering information. The lawyer in me, my father had been an attorney before his death, recognized the strategic advantage in the latter approach. I decided to watch longer to understand the full scope of the betrayal before confronting it. As much as it hurt, knowledge was power, and I needed all the power I could get. Over the next hour, I witnessed Eric and Cassandra's evening unfold in my home. They ate dinner at the dining table where Eric and I had shared countless meals. They drank more of my wine, laughing and talking like a long-established couple. And then, the moment that eliminated any possible innocent explanation, Eric took Cassandra's face in his hands and kissed her deeply, passionately, without hesitation or guilt. "I've missed this," he said when they finally broke apart. "These stolen evenings aren't enough anymore. I want to wake up with you every morning, not just when Ursula's out of town." "We've talked about this," Cassandra replied, running her fingers through his hair in a gesture so intimate it made me flinch. "You know what you need to do." Eric sighed. "I know. It's just complicated with her mother being sick now. The timing's bad." "It's never going to be the perfect time to leave your wife," Cassandra said, her tone somewhere between sympathetic and impatient. "But you can't keep us both on the hook forever." "I won't," Eric promised. "Once this situation with her mother settles, I'll tell her it's over. I've already started moving some money into my private account, and I've been documenting her emotional instability with the whole fertility situation that should help if she tries to fight for more than her share in the divorce." The calculated cruelty of his words left me breathless. Not only was he cheating, but he was actively planning to leave me to take what was rightfully mine, to paint me as emotionally unstable, to gain leverage in a divorce I didn't even know was coming. When they moved toward our bedroom and the camera feed could no longer track them, I finally called Eric's phone. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. 10 minutes later, he texted, "Sorry, out shooting that editorial. Service is spotty. How's your mum doing?" The bald-faced lie sent while he was presumably in bed with his ex-girlfriend in our bed crystallized something in me. This wasn't a mistake or a momentary lapse. This was calculated deception on a scale I could barely comprehend. I typed back, "They're running tests. I'll know more tomorrow." Then I set my phone aside and opened my laptop. If Eric could be calculating, so could I. It was time to understand exactly what I was dealing with, to gather evidence to protect myself from whatever he was planning. I had thought I was flying to Chicago to support my sick mother. Instead, I found myself planning a defense against the husband who had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. The next morning, I visited my mother in the hospital briefly. She was stable, but weak, her usually vibrant personality subdued by medication and fatigue. I sat by her bed, holding her hand and making appropriate conversation, but my mind was elsewhere. The guilt of not being fully present for her added another layer to my pain, but I couldn't bring myself to share what I'd discovered. Not yet, not when she needed to focus on healing. "You look tired, sweetie," she observed during a moment of clarity. "Is everything okay?" "Just worried about you, Mum," I said, forcing a smile. "And some work stress. Nothing important." She squeezed my hand weakly. "You never could lie to me, Ursula, but I won't pry. Just know that whatever it is, you'll get through it. You're stronger than you think." The echo of the kind grandmother's words from the plane struck me, and I blinked back tears. "I hope so, Mum." After promising to return that evening, I kissed her forehead and left my mind already turning back to the investigation I'd begun in earnest. Back in my hotel room, I created a methodical approach to understanding the full scope of Eric's betrayal. First, I accessed our shared calendar system. Eric had always insisted on maintaining a joint digital calendar to keep our busy lives synchronized. Scrolling back through the past year, I noticed a pattern on days when I had business trips or overnight events. Eric often had vague entries like location scout or client meeting without specific details. I cross-referenced these dates with our credit card statements, which I could access online through our joint account. The results were damning. On numerous occasions when I was away, there were charges at romantic restaurants in Seattle that Eric had never mentioned. Hotel bars, wine shops, jewelry stores with purchases he'd never given to me. One particularly painful discovery was a charge at an upscale boutique the day before my birthday. The silver bracelet he'd presented as my gift had apparently been selected during an outing with Cassandra. Phone records revealed another layer of deception. While Eric typically texted me dutifully during my absences, there were always long gaps in our communication gaps that coincided with numerous calls and messages to a number I now recognized as Cassandra's. As I dug deeper, I decided to reach out to our mutual friends, not to expose Eric yet, but to gather more information under the guise of planning a surprise for him. The responses were telling in their awkwardness, their careful phrasing. Several friends seemed uncomfortable with my questions about Eric's whereabouts on specific dates. One, Megan, who had been a bridesmaid at our wedding, eventually called me directly. "Ursula, what's really going on?" she asked, her voice tense. "These questions about Eric, they don't sound like you're planning a surprise." I took a deep breath. "I need you to be honest with me, Megan. Have you seen Eric with Cassandra recently?" The silence that followed told me everything, but I waited for her to find the words. I didn't want to be the one to tell you," she finally said, her voice small with guilt. "I saw them together at Canlis 2 months ago. They were holding hands across the table. I confronted Eric the next day, and he swore it was a one-time thing, that he was ending it, that he loved you, and had made a terrible mistake." "But you didn't tell me," I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. "He begged me not to, said he wanted to confess himself, that telling you would destroy your marriage." She paused. "I should have told you anyway. I've felt sick about it ever since. I'm so sorry, Ursula." "How long do you think it's been going on?" I asked, needing to know but dreading the answer. Another hesitation. "Based on things I've heard from other friends, it might have been happening on and off since before you were married. Cassandra never really left the picture from what I understand." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Not just an affair, but a continuous relationship spanning our entire marriage, perhaps predating it. Every anniversary, every birthday, every moment I thought was ours alone had been shadowed by this secret third presence in our relationship. Armed with this new information, I continued my investigation with grim determination. I searched Eric's email. We had shared passwords early in our relationship as a sign of trust, something he'd apparently forgotten. While he'd been careful to delete most incriminating messages, I found conversations with his accountant, referencing a private account I knew nothing about, confirming what I'd overheard on the security camera. By the end of the second day, the picture was devastatingly clear. Eric had been maintaining a relationship with Cassandra throughout our entire marriage. The perfect husband I thought I had was a carefully constructed facade, and now he was actively planning to leave me in the most advantageous way possible for himself, financially and legally. That night, I made a decision. I had come to Chicago because my mother needed me, but I wouldn't stay the full week as planned. I would fly back to Seattle tomorrow, unannounced. It was time to confront the truth face to face. I booked a return flight for the following afternoon, made arrangements with my sister to cover my hospital visits, and then called my college roommate Laura, who had become a family law attorney. "I need advice," I told her, my voice steady. "I just discovered my husband has been having an affair for our entire marriage and is planning to divorce me. I need to know how to protect myself." Laura's professional demeanor kicked in immediately. "First, don't confront him until you've secured copies of all financial records and important documents. Second, consult a divorce attorney before any confrontation. Third, if possible, get evidence of the affair. It may not matter legally in Washington state, but it could influence settlement negotiations." "I have evidence," I said, thinking of the security camera footage I'd been downloading, "and I'm coming back to Seattle tomorrow. Stay at a hotel first," she advised. "Don't tell him you're coming. And Ursula, I'm so sorry this is happening to you." As I packed my suitcase that night, I felt a strange calm replace the shock and pain of the past 2 days. The clarity of purpose, the methodical planning, these were things I understood from my professional life. I was taking control of a situation that had spun wildly beyond my grasp without my knowledge. Before going to bed, I checked the security feed one last time. Eric was alone in our living room, laptop open, phone to his ear. I increased the volume. "She doesn't suspect a thing," he was saying, presumably to Cassandra. "She's completely focused on her mother right now. This is actually perfect timing. I can work on the financial arrangements while she's distracted." His callous dismissal of my mother's health crisis, his exploitation of my family emergency for his own purposes, these final cruelties hardened my resolve. Whatever love I still felt for the man I thought I'd married was withering rapidly, replaced by a determination to expose the truth and protect what was mine. Tomorrow I would return to Seattle, and Eric would discover that his carefully constructed house of lies was about to collapse around him. The flight back to Seattle was a blur of determination mixed with moments of crushing sadness. Unlike my outbound journey, this time, I knew exactly what awaited me at home. There were no illusions left to maintain, no comfortable lies to hide behind, just the cold reality of betrayal and the confrontation to come. I had texted Eric that morning, maintaining the fiction that I was still focused on my mother's care. "Mum's doing better today. Might be released by the weekend. I'll call you tonight with an update." His response was predictably supportive. "That's great news. Give her my love. Miss you." Each interaction felt like another twist of the knife, another confirmation of how easily deceit came to him. The man I had shared my life with for 5 years was a stranger, an accomplished actor playing the role of devoted husband while living a completely different reality behind my back. When the plane landed in Seattle, I didn't immediately head home. Following Laura's advice, I checked into a downtown hotel and met briefly with a divorce attorney she had recommended. The meeting was brief but productive. I outlined what I knew, showed some of the evidence I'd gathered, and received preliminary guidance on how to proceed. "Washington is a no-fault divorce state," the attorney explained, "but the evidence of financial deception and hidden accounts could be very relevant in property division. Document everything, record the confrontation if possible, and try to keep your emotions in check when you face him." That last piece of advice seemed nearly impossible, but I nodded anyway. By late afternoon, I was ready. I ordered a rideshare to our home, checking the security app one last time before leaving the hotel. The house appeared empty. Eric's car wasn't in the driveway, and there was no movement on any of the camera feeds. Perfect. I let myself in quietly, though there was no need for stealth. The house was indeed empty, but evidence of Cassandra's presence was everywhere. Once I knew to look for it, a different brand of wine in the rack than what I'd purchased, a scarf I didn't recognize, draped over a chair, a pair of earrings on the bathroom counter that definitely weren't mine. Most damning of all was our bedroom. The sheets had been changed, but a long red hair on the pillowcase told me everything I needed to know about where Cassandra had spent the previous night. Fighting back nausea, I went downstairs to the living room and settled into an armchair facing the front door. Then I waited. It was nearly 7 in the evening when I heard Eric's key in the lock. I remained perfectly still, watching as he entered carrying grocery bags, humming to himself. He was halfway to the kitchen before he noticed me sitting there and nearly dropped the bags in shock. "Ursula," he exclaimed, his face cycling rapidly through surprise, confusion, and alarm before settling on a poor imitation of delight. "What are you doing home? Is your mum okay?" "My mother is stable," I replied, my voice eerily calm even to my own ears. "But I think you and I need to talk, don't you, Eric?" He set the groceries down, slowly buying himself time to think. "Of course, but I wasn't expecting you. If I'd known you were coming home early, I would have picked you up from the airport." "Like you picked up Cassandra after I left?" I asked, watching his face drain of colour. "Or, should I say, like you invited her over within an hour of my departure?" "What are you talking about?" he attempted, but his voice lacked conviction. His eyes darted to the security camera mounted in the corner of the room, and I saw the moment realization dawned. "Ursula, I can explain." "Please do," I interrupted, pulling out my phone and placing it on the coffee table between us. "Explain why your ex-girlfriend has been in our home while I was at my mother's hospital bedside. Explain why you told her you're planning to leave me after my mother's health crisis passes. Explain why you've been documenting my emotional instability to use against me in a divorce." With each accusation, Eric seemed to physically shrink. The confident, loving husband I thought I knew was gone, replaced by a cornered man desperately searching for an escape route. "You spied on me," he finally said, attempting to shift blame. "You watched me through the security cameras." "I checked our home security system before boarding my flight," I corrected him. "Something you encouraged me to do whenever one of us was travelling. For peace of mind, I believe you said." Eric sank onto the couch, running his hands through his hair. "It's not what it looks like." "Really?" I laughed, the sound brittle and foreign. "Because it looks like you've been carrying on a relationship with Cassandra throughout our entire marriage. It looks like you were in our bed with her while you were texting me about how much you missed me. It looks like you've been planning to divorce me in the most advantageous way possible for yourself, financially and emotionally." "That's not fair," he began. "Fair." I cut him off, my carefully maintained composure finally cracking. "You want to talk about fair? Was it fair to marry me while maintaining a relationship with your ex? Was it fair to let me believe we were trying to start a family together while you were actively preventing that from happening? Was it fair to exploit my mother's heart attack as a convenient distraction for your divorce planning?" Eric stared at me, apparently realizing that denials were useless at this point. "How much did you hear?" he finally asked. "Enough," I said. "I heard enough to understand that our entire marriage has been a lie, that you never stopped seeing Cassandra, that you've been moving money into private accounts, that you've been documenting my supposed emotional instability during our fertility struggles that you were likely sabotaging." He didn't deny it. Instead, he shifted tactics, his expression softening into something resembling remorse. "I never meant to hurt you, Ursula. Things with Cassandra, they're complicated. We have history. I tried to end it so many times, but—" "Stop," I said, raising a hand. "I'm not interested in your justifications or your version of events. I've seen and heard enough to know what's real." "What do you want?" he asked, his tone suddenly practical, businesslike. The mask had dropped completely now. There was no pretense of the loving husband, just a man calculating his losses. I want the truth. For once in our marriage, I want complete honesty from you. Something in my tone must have convinced him that further lies were pointless. He sighed heavily, leaning back against the couch cushions. Fine. You want the truth. Yes, Cassandra and I never fully ended our relationship. We tried to break it off when I met you, but we couldn't stay away from each other. I do care about you, Ursula. That wasn't a lie. But Cassandra and I, it's always been complicated between us. Did you ever intend to be faithful to me? I asked, needing to know, despite how much the answer might hurt. I wanted to, he said, which was no answer at all. When we first got married, I really thought I could make a clean break from her, but then she moved back to Seattle and we ran into each other and you've been seeing her behind my back for our entire marriage, I finished for him. While living in the home, I mostly pay for benefiting from my income and stability, presenting yourself as a devoted husband. He didn't deny it. I was going to tell you, he claimed, after your mother recovered. I didn't want to add to your stress right now. How considerate, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. And the secret bank account, the documentation of my emotional instability, were those also for my benefit? Eric had the grace to look ashamed, at least momentarily. I was trying to protect myself. Divorce can get ugly, and I wanted to make sure I was prepared. While ensuring I wasn't, I noted, while actively hiding assets and building a case against me. You're a successful executive, he countered defensively. You make 3 times what I do. I was just trying to level the playing field. By lying and stealing, I said flatly, by betraying every vow we made to each other. We sat in tense silence for several moments. Outside, rain began to fall, the soft patter against the windows, a stark contrast to the emotional storm inside. So what happens now? Eric finally asked. Now I want you to tell me everything, I said, my voice steady once more. How long has this really been going on? Did you ever stop seeing her even briefly? Was any of our marriage real? Eric stared at his hands for a long moment before meeting my eyes. Cassandra and I broke up when she moved to New York for law school. That much was true. But we stayed in touch. When she moved back to Seattle about 6 months before our wedding, we reconnected. I told myself it was just closure, just getting the past out of my system before marrying you. But it wasn't, I prompted when he paused. No, he admitted. We slept together 2 weeks before our wedding. I promised her it was the last time that I was committed to you, and I was Ursula, or I wanted to be. But 3 months after we were married, Cassandra called me during one of your business trips. She was upset, said she couldn't stand seeing my wedding photos on social media. One thing led to another. And you've been seeing her ever since, I concluded, for nearly 5 years. He nodded slowly. At first it was just occasional, when you travelled, but over time it became more regular, more serious. And our attempts to have a child, was that all a lie too? Something flickered across his face. Guilt, perhaps, or just discomfort at being caught. I wasn't ready for children, he admitted, not with our marriage being what it was. So, yes, I took precautions without telling you, claimed performance anxiety when you suggested fertility testing that might have exposed the truth. Each revelation was like another blow, but I forced myself to keep asking questions to understand the full extent of his deception. And now, you and Cassandra are planning a future together. You were going to leave me after my mother's health improved. That was the plan, he confirmed, a hint of defiance entering his voice. Cassandra's tired of being the other woman. She's given me an ultimatum, her or you, and I've chosen her. I'm sorry, Ursula, I really am, but I can't keep living this double life anymore. The irony of his statement, that he was the victim of an unsustainable situation he had created entirely himself, might have been laughable under different circumstances. How magnanimous of you to finally choose, I said, standing up. Well, let me make this easier for both of us. I want you out of this house by tomorrow morning. My lawyer will be in touch regarding the divorce proceedings, and Eric, I suggest you come clean about the separate account and any other assets you've been hiding. Washington is a community property state, and financial deception doesn't play well in court. His face hardened. You can't just throw me out. This is my home too. The home that's primarily in my name, on which I make the majority of the payments, I challenged. The home where you brought your mistress within an hour of my departure. I think I can. And I have the security footage to support any legal action necessary if you refuse. We stared at each other across the coffee table, two people who had once promised to love each other forever, now reduced to adversaries in a marriage that had been built on lies from the beginning. I'll stay with Cassandra tonight, he finally conceded, but this isn't over, Ursula. I'll be taking my fair share when all this is settled. Your fair share? I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping me. We can certainly discuss what's fair given the circumstances. I'm sure the judge will be very interested in the security footage, the hidden accounts, and your documented plan to use my fertility struggles against me. Eric paled slightly, perhaps realizing for the first time the full implications of what had been captured on camera. Without another word, he headed upstairs, presumably to pack an overnight bag. I remained standing in the living room, shaking with adrenaline and emotion, but also feeling something unexpected beneath the pain relief. The truth, however devastating, was finally out in the open, and with it came the first step toward whatever would come next. The days and weeks following that confrontation passed in a blur of legal consultations, emotional processing, and practical considerations. Eric moved in with Cassandra officially, not even bothering with the pretense of finding his own place first. I stayed in our home, though sometimes the memories it contained felt suffocating. The security camera footage proved invaluable during the divorce proceedings, not just for the evidence it provided of Eric's infidelity, which, as my lawyer had predicted, wasn't particularly relevant legally, but for documenting his admissions about hidden assets and his planned strategy to portray me as emotionally unstable. When confronted with this evidence, Eric's attorney quickly advised a more reasonable approach to the settlement negotiations. Throughout this process, I discovered additional betrayals I hadn't initially uncovered. Eric had been using our joint credit card to purchase gifts for Cassandra, including jewelry and weekend getaways disguised as photography workshops. He had been systematically moving small amounts of money from our shared accounts to his private one for years, accumulating a significant sum that he had intended to keep hidden. Perhaps most painfully, I learned from a former client of his that Eric and Cassandra had been seen together at industry events where he'd claimed to be alone sometimes, with her openly introduced as his partner to people who didn't know me. The deliberate compartmentalization of his life, presenting himself as a devoted husband in one context while building a parallel relationship in another, spoke to a level of calculation that still left me breathless when I allowed myself to fully consider it. Friends and family rallied around me in ways both expected and surprising. My college roommate Laura, who had first advised me legally, became a constant support, offering both professional guidance and emotional understanding. My sister Karen flew out from Chicago once our mother was stable, staying with me for 2 weeks and helping me sort through the practical aspects of separation. Other relationships proved more complicated. Some mutual friends chose sides, with a few surprisingly supporting Eric, despite knowing the full story of his deception. Marriages are complex, one former dinner party regular told me uncomfortably when I ran into him at a coffee shop. I'm sure there are two sides to this. The implication that I might have somehow driven Eric to years of systematic deception was infuriating, but I came to recognize it as a defense mechanism. People who had known us as a couple needed to believe there was some explanation beyond simple betrayal, something that would allow them to maintain their faith in relationships generally. What surprised me most during this period was my own resilience. Yes, there were nights when I sobbed until my throat was raw, days when getting out of bed seemed impossible, but there was also a growing sense of clarity of purpose. of self-rediscovery that I hadn't anticipated. You know what's strange? I told Laura over wine one evening about 3 months after the split. Part of me feels like I should be more devastated than I am, like I should be completely broken by this. But you're not, she observed, studying me with a mixture of pride and concern. No, I agreed. I'm hurt, I'm angry, I feel stupid for not seeing what was happening, but I also feel relieved, like I've been carrying a weight I didn't even know was there, and now it's gone. That weight was the cognitive dissonance, Laura suggested. Part of you always knew something wasn't right, but you couldn't reconcile that feeling with the marriage you thought you had. Now the dissonance is gone. The truth hurts, but it's also freeing. She was right. Once the initial shock passed, I recognized that our marriage had never been what I thought it was. The loving husband I grieved had never truly existed. He was a carefully maintained fiction, a role Eric had played while living an entirely different reality. The divorce was finalized 6 months after that night. I confronted Eric in our living room. By then, I had already decided to make a fresh start. My company had offices in several major cities, and I requested a transfer to the Denver branch, where a senior marketing director position had recently opened up. Are you sure you want to leave Seattle? My boss asked when I applied for the transfer. You've built such a strong network here. I'm sure, I told her. I need a change of scenery, a new challenge, and honestly, Denver's mountains are calling me. She smiled, understanding in her eyes. The position is yours if you want it. You're the most qualified candidate by far, and after everything you've managed to accomplish while going through this personal upheaval, well, I think you'll thrive with this fresh start. I sold the house Too Many Memories, Too Many Shadows, and purchased a modern condo in downtown Denver with large windows that framed the distant Rockies. The divorce settlement, while not giving me everything I might have felt entitled to, given the circumstances, provided enough financial security to make this transition comfortably. Eric and Cassandra announced their engagement a week after our divorce was finalized, a timing choice that might have been calculated to hurt me, but instead felt like final confirmation that I had made the right decision in moving on completely. According to mutual friends who still kept me updated, despite my request not to, they were planning a destination wedding in Hawaii, ironically the same location Eric and I had honeymooned. 1 year after that fateful flight to Chicago, I found myself settled in my new city, excelling in my new role, and slowly building a new social circle. The pain hadn't disappeared entirely. I still had moments of anger when I thought about the years I had lost to Eric's deception. Still occasionally woke from dreams where I was back in that airport terminal watching my marriage unravel on my phone screen. But those moments became less frequent, less overwhelming. I started dating again cautiously at first, then with growing confidence as I learned to trust my instincts, the same instincts that had tried to warn me about Eric's behavior, but that I had repeatedly ignored. The security cameras that had revealed the truth about my marriage became somewhat ironically a symbol of my new approach to relationships, clear-eyed, transparent, unwilling to ignore warning signs or accept less than I deserved. I installed a security system in my new condo as well, not out of paranoia, but as a reminder that knowledge, however painful, is ultimately power. Sometimes I think about what might have happened if I hadn't checked that camera feed before boarding my flight. How many more years might I have lost to a marriage built on lies? Would Eric eventually have followed through on his plan to leave me after manufacturing a narrative about my emotional instability? Would I have been blindsided, not just by his betrayal, but by financial manipulation as well? The security camera that was meant to protect our home from external threats ended up protecting me from the deception happening within its walls. Technology revealed what human intuition had suspected, but couldn't prove that the life I thought I was living was an elaborate fiction, a carefully maintained facade, hiding a painful reality. In the end, the greatest security didn't come from cameras or locks, but from the truth however devastating it initially seemed, because the truth, unlike the comfortable lies I had been living with, provided a solid foundation on which to rebuild. It's been 5 years since that life-changing moment at the airport. 5 years since I watched my marriage crumble through the lens of a security camera. 5 years of rebuilding, rediscovering, and ultimately thriving in ways I never could have imagined during those first dark days. Denver has become more than just an escape, it's truly home now. My promotion to marketing director led to further advancement. I'm now the vice president of brand strategy for the entire Western region. The work is challenging and fulfilling, allowing me to build a team and mentor younger professionals in ways that have added unexpected richness to my professional life. 2 years after moving to Denver, I met Daniel at a photography exhibit of all places. The irony wasn't lost on me, but unlike Eric's carefully composed images, Daniel's photographs were raw and honest street scenes capturing unguarded moments of human connection. Like his art, Daniel values authenticity above all else. He's a high school art teacher with a passion for community education, and his straightforward nature was refreshing after years of navigating Eric's deceptions. Our relationship progressed slowly, deliberately. I was transparent about my past from the beginning, sharing not just what had happened, but what I had learned from it. I need complete honesty, I told him on our 3rd date, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it might hurt. I'd rather know a difficult truth than live with a comfortable lie. I wouldn't have it any other way, Daniel replied. My parents stayed in a marriage filled with secrets for 40 years. I watched what that did to both of them. I promised myself I'd never live that way. Trust didn't come easily after what I'd been through, but Daniel was patient, consistent, transparent. When small disagreements arose, we addressed them directly rather than letting resentment build. When insecurities surfaced, and they did, often triggered by memories of my marriage, we talked through them together rather than dismissing them. We moved in together last year, a step I took with both excitement and trepidation. The night before the move, I had a momentary panic attack, suddenly flooded with memories of Eric and the life I thought we had built together. What if I'm making the same mistake? I asked my therapist in an emergency session. What if I'm missing something again? You're not the same person you were then, she reminded me gently. You trust differently now, not blindly, but with awareness, and most importantly, you trust yourself. She was right. The woman who had boarded that plane to Chicago 5 years ago, naively checking the security camera out of habit, was gone. In her place was someone stronger, more discerning, unwilling to ignore red flags or silence her own instincts. I occasionally hear updates about Eric and Cassandra through mutual acquaintances, though I've long since removed myself from social circles that would put us in direct contact. Their marriage lasted less than 2 years. Apparently, the excitement of forbidden romance couldn't sustain a legitimate relationship. According to a friend who still lives in Seattle, Eric has since moved to Portland and started a new photography business specializing in, ironically, authentic relationship portraits. Sometimes I wonder if Cassandra eventually discovered what I learned the hard way, that a man capable of sustained deception in one relationship will likely bring that same capacity into the next. But that's no longer my concern or my burden to carry. My mother thankfully made a full recovery from her heart attack and has since become one of my strongest supporters. Everything happens for a reason. She often says, though I'm not entirely convinced of that. What I do believe is that we can find meaning in even our most painful experiences if we're willing to learn from them. The security camera that revealed Eric's betrayal changed the course of my life in ways I could never have anticipated. In the moment, it felt like the end of everything I had built and believed in. Looking back, I recognize it as the beginning of a journey toward authentic happiness and self-discovery. When Daniel proposed 6 months ago, he did so without grand gestures or elaborate staging, Just a quiet question asked on our balcony one evening as we watched the sun set behind the mountains. I said yes without hesitation, not because I needed marriage to validate our relationship, but because I wanted to build a life with someone who had proven day after day that honesty and respect were non-negotiable values for him too. Our wedding will be small, just close friends and family, gathered at a mountain lodge outside Denver. No elaborate photography sessions, no performances for social media, just an authentic celebration of a relationship built on truth from the beginning. Sometimes life's greatest revelations come in unexpected ways. For me, it was through the lens of a security camera, a technological eye that revealed what human perception had missed or refused to see. The pain of that moment standing in an airport terminal, watching my husband welcome another woman into our home, will never completely fade. But neither will the strength I found in its aftermath, the clarity that came from finally seeing the truth, and the peace that comes from building a life where security isn't about locks and cameras, but about honesty, transparency, and self-respect. Have you ever discovered something on a security camera that changed your life? Share your story in the comments below. If my journey resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about finding strength after betrayal. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the most painful discoveries lead to the most beautiful beginnings.